Dan Houser, the co-founder of Rockstar Games and the creative force behind iconic video game franchises such as Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, shared an in-depth reflection on his career, creative process, and outlook on the future of gaming. Growing up in London during the late 70s and 80s, Dan was deeply influenced by literature and film, especially classics like the Godfather series and Goodfellas. These films, with their masterful storytelling, complex characters, and rich cinematic presence, shaped Dan's appreciation for layered narratives and character-driven stories, which later became integral to his video game creations. In particular, the intricate operatic storytelling and pacing of such films contrasted with the faster-paced modern cinema that came with the 90s, offering Dan insight into narrative rhythm and tone that he adapted for games. Drawing from these diverse cinematic influences, Dan described how literature and film were a natural inspiration before open-world video games even existed. The themes of crime, human complexity, morality, and society's underbelly, evident in movies like Scarface, Casino, and True Romance, resonated in his later work with Rockstar, transforming the video game landscape into a storytelling medium nearly unparalleled for its scope and ambition. Dan detailed the journey from the early days at Rockstar, emphasizing the team's ambition to innovate continually with each title. Starting with Grand Theft Auto 3, which introduced revolutionary systemic and sandbox mechanics, the team created worlds where players could feel completely free while immersed in vibrant, living environments. The interaction between players and the autonomous game systems formed a living world that both reacted to and challenged the user, providing an emergent experience unlike anything before. This blend of player freedom and responsive world-building became the cornerstone of Rockstar's success. With Grand Theft Auto 4 and V, Dan and the team delved deeper into the narrative potential of open worlds, embracing multi-protagonist structures and refining character complexity, as seen in GTA 5's interplay between Michael, Franklin, and Trevor. Dan acknowledged the technical and creative challenges of constantly balancing narrative depth with open-world freedom, noting that the Grand Theft Auto series faced an always-present tension between story and gameplay, which they endeavored to resolve creatively. His proudest work during this period included Red Dead Redemption and its sequel, where narrative ambition and emotional depth reached new heights through detailed character arcs and an evocative portrayal of the Old West mythos. Dan elaborated on his philosophy of creating 360-degree characters, requiring him to imagine how protagonists would behave in any imaginable circumstance, fully fleshing out their strengths, flaws, moral compass, and humanity. This approach is exemplified in characters like Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2 and Nico Bellic from Grand Theft Auto 4, both of whom break the mold of typical video game avatars by possessing conflicting emotions, motivations, and personal journeys. He described how extensive internal dialogues and considerations shape a character's worldview, behavior, and relationships within the game's world. For instance, the narrative arcs reveal the characters' struggles with their past, mortality, and morality, inviting players into a profound emotional engagement. Arthur's journey, deeply rooted in themes of redemption and confronting mortality, was especially close to Dan's heart due to coinciding personal circumstances such as starting a family. The richness of these characters and their stories, Dan argued, stemmed from sustained creative investment over years and their grounding in universal human experiences. A recurring theme Dan touched upon was the delicate equilibrium between open-world freedom and guided storytelling. Games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and GTA 5 represent efforts to harmonize these elements so that player agency does not come at the expense of emotional narrative depth. Dan explained that while sandbox gameplay allows players to explore a world independently, the structured story functions as an anchor, unlocking new mechanics, deepening character motivations, and providing meaningful context to player actions. He reflected on criticism from GTA 4, where some felt the story's intensity constricted player freedom and made Nico a less effective avatar for open-world gaming. By contrast, Red Dead Redemption 2 achieved a more compelling fusion of a robust narrative with genuine player choice, allowing character complexity to coexist with freedom. Dan also noted that the player's ability to influence their character's morality, oscillating between kindness and cruelty, fosters a richer engagement and supports replayability, a hallmark of Rockstar's acclaimed titles. In discussing his current projects under the new company Absurd Ventures, Dan introduced Nigel Dave, a superintelligent AI character developed for a better paradise, a dystopian near-future game world. Nigel Dave embodies a conflicted entity, part sociopath, part curious being yearning for human experiences such as love and connection, despite his flawed nature and attempts at goodness. Dan described Nigel as a side character with godlike powers within his digital realm, grappling with metaphysical questions of existence and identity. This nuanced portrayal contrasts sharply with one-dimensional evil AI tropes, making Nigel a symbol of thoughtful science fiction storytelling. Dan emphasized his desire to explore the ambiguous morality and chaotic nature of artificial intelligence in this world, as well as the dangers posed not necessarily by the AI itself, but by the children it creates, entities that may pursue world domination to harmful extremes. The Absurdiverse combines comedy, drama, and cynicism in a living sitcom-like open world, with ambitions to span video games, comic books, and animated media, illustrating Dan's ongoing passion for multifaceted narrative universes. The conversation touched on the challenges of satire in an era marked by rapid political and social shifts that increasingly border on absurdity. Dan expressed the difficulty of satirizing culture in real time when reality itself often appears stranger than fiction. This tension fueled his work on American Caper, a wild, satirical comic book series set in modern-day Wyoming that amplifies American cultural extremes through exaggerated and often over-the-top characters, from devout Mormons acting as serial killers to cryptic online conspiracy theorists, reflecting and critiquing contemporary social divides. He explained how shorter lead times in comics allow for timely, more direct satire, unlike the multi-year development cycles of video games. The project feeds into Dan's interest in capturing the contradictions and complexities of modern Americana with a blend of humor and tragedy, offering a medium to address urgent cultural questions that might be harder to tackle in games due to production constraints. Dan provided rare insight into his intensive and immersive writing process, often locking himself away with simple fare like anchovy and onion pizza and Diet Coke to focus on scripting vast dialogues, character interactions, and narrative arcs. He described how, especially on GTA 4, he had to overcome insecurities about writing authentic immigrant voices, spending years refining scripts that amounted to thousands of printed pages, and collaborating closely with teams to piece together stories mission by mission. This painstaking process involved almost obsessive note-taking, prolonged periods of procrastination, and periods of intense creative breakthroughs. Working alongside trusted partners like Navid Kansari, Dan found collaboration invaluable, each contributing to shaping the tone, realism, and humor of the worlds they built. He also acknowledged the crucial role of talented voice actors and motion capture performers who breathed life into characters, supporting narrative immersion beyond just the written word. Throughout the discussion, Dan wrestled with profound themes regarding human nature, the coexistence of good and evil within individuals, and the shifting lines between them as people change and grow. Drawing from literary references such as Solzhenitsyn, Dostoevsky, and Hunter S. Thompson, he emphasized that acknowledging human flaws, contradictions, and darkness is essential to being fully human and to telling authentic stories. Death and mortality hold a special place in Dan's work and reflections, especially in Red Dead Redemption 2, where Arthur Morgan confronts his impending death with a poignant reckoning of his life's choices. Dan shared deeply personal views on mortality, expressing varying degrees of fear and spiritual contemplation, touching on ideas of metaphysical existence, the search for purpose, and the centrality of love as the fundamental meaning of life. His hope is anchored in embracing the flawed beauty within ourselves and others while maintaining compassion. In addition to cinema, Dan cited major literary works strongly influencing his worldview and storytelling, including Tolstoy's War and Peace, Middlemarch by George Eliot, and classic war literature such as The Thin Red Line and Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. He regards these sweeping epics as attempts to encompass all of life within a narrative and strives to evoke a similar scope in his games. Dan also referenced the poignant impact Holocaust literature had on his understanding of human resilience amid atrocity. Acknowledging his upbringing in London during the Cold War, amid prevalent cultural fears about Eastern Europe, Dan reflected on the irony and complexity of history, such as forming close personal connections with Eastern Europeans who once were portrayed as enemies. These layered historical and cultural perspectives enrich his game's authenticity and thematic complexity. Reflecting on his 20-plus years at Rockstar, Dan described a journey from naive youth to mature creative, constantly learning, evolving his craft, and balancing the pressures of large-scale game development with artistic integrity. He stressed Rockstar's culture of creative excellence, ambition, and reinvention underpinning the company's enduring success. Despite leaving Rockstar in 2020 to establish Absurd Ventures, Dan expressed no regrets, viewing his past work as privilege and stepping stones towards new creative challenges. Looking forward, Dan remains optimistic about video games as an evolving medium with vast, unexplored potential. While acknowledging technical and production challenges, he is excited about emerging possibilities from AI and new storytelling avenues. He advocates maintaining a focus on originality, creativity, and human-centric narratives to push games beyond previous boundaries. The enigmatic "Have you seen Gavin?" line from Red Dead Redemption 2 sparked wide fascination and debate among fans. Dan admitted that the mystery was partially a playful narrative device, whose full resolution was never firmly decided, deliberately left ambiguous to generate intrigue and player speculation. He revealed that Gavin, who may or may not be Nigel Dave's split personality or a lost companion, was meant to be elusive, emphasizing the storytelling value in such open-ended elements. This anecdote underscored Rockstar's awareness of player engagement and the vibrant community culture that interprets and dissects minute story details. Dan expressed amusement and gratitude toward the fans' passion and creativity, highlighting that unexpected elements like this can become memorable and beloved parts of the gaming experience, sometimes overtaking even the primary storylines in player attention.